Thank you
Is
so
on.
much, Natalie, for being here and telling us about how to stay safe online as an activist. We really appreciate you being here. Uh, and Gardy, thank you for hosting and taking care of our uh, speaker and attendees today. So, Natalie, over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. This is a topic actually that's dear to my heart. I love talking about cybersecurity. I'll talk about that a little bit in a second, how I dove into this. But also because as a longtime activist, including long before the internet happened, right, the landscape of what makes it dangerous to be an activist has changed so dramatically in the last 20 or 30 years, and even especially in the last 5 years, right? It's constantly changing. So, so let's start with, I'm going to do a little bit of introduction about myself. I'm the presenter for today. Like I mentioned, love talking about cybersecurity. And but what I want to do is provide you a little bit of context. I am by trade a business strategist, but one of the things I'm known for is kind of jumping down rabbit holes and becoming an expert on something when I can't find solutions that work for me or my clients or people that I know. And that's why if you go onto my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that, you know, I'm also an expert on LinkedIn, which is I had to do because, like, how are we, you know, building businesses when your LinkedIn profile sucks? But that's also how I got involved in cybersecurity. I am not an IT specialist. There's a whole lot of people who understand the IT side of it. My area of expertise as cybersecurity and data protection is the human behavior side of it. That means what you and I can do on our own without spending hundreds and thousands of dollars to protect ourselves. So my interest in this topic actually started in grad school when I wrote a major research paper on the Safe Harbor Act. For those of you who aren't old enough, this was the first attempt to regulate data privacy transfers between the EU and the US. The EU and pretty much everywhere in the world has really strict data and privacy laws, and the US does not. Even when they say it does, there's still not a whole lot of teeth going back. We benefit from that in the US because at some point it just becomes easier for companies to just kind of go with whatever is the strictest ruling. And in the US right now, it's California actually. But it's easier for us to do that, but we're still, especially when we're in the US, still have a lot of other things to worry about. And we're putting ourselves in the challenges of what we're doing. So the reason I talk about this, and I do, you know, groups and webinars and things like that, is because not a whole lot of people are talking about it the way that I do. So what I really want to do is kind of like shift the way you are approaching your online life to protecting yourself. And I'm also going to give you resources. I don't believe in recreating the wheel. So there's a couple of really great resources that I'm going to point you to. And as I find additional resources, if you know of any, share them with me. I'll put them on my website because I've got a whole website with just free resources. Some of them paid, but most of them are free. Right now, you'll see on the left-hand side, you are welcome to either connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. My Linktree, which I know nobody's using Linktree, but I'm old enough that I do, is at Cybersec for Humans. That's actually my social, my website, everything. And that will always have the most recent links to websites, to links, to things like that you need to do that. So that's a really good one to have. And then, of course, the page that I have that has all the resources is cybersecforhumans.com/resources. Okay, so my first part that I want to understand is I want you to know is that cybersecurity is a people problem. It is not an IT problem. And the reason that's so important for you to understand is because I want you to be empowered and to understand that you play a huge role in how easy you are to hack or to have your ID stolen, right? Bad habits, bad results. So inevitably, whether you've probably actually already been subject, right? If you've experienced phishing and who hasn't, you've already been subject to different ways that people are trying to reach out to you. Now, generally speaking, most hackers will give up trying to break into your system after more than 5 or 10 minutes, right? Like if you're going to be that long, there's plenty of people who leave their stuff wide open. So why should they? So really, for most of us, the goal is to kind of thwart the bad guys for 5 to 10 minutes. That is not the case with activists. And I'm going to tell you about that in a second. Okay, and I'm not going to lie. What I'm going to talk about may feel really overwhelming, but it is doable. It is tedious. A lot of it is when you kind of get into your own habits and you're doing the right things, it will not feel so overwhelming, right? But setting that stuff up is not necessarily fun, right? When you're doing that kind of thing. Okay, so my goal with this presentation and our conversation is, threefold. First is I want to teach you how to start thinking critically and about how everything is connected, what to look for, and why what you do matters, including things you may not realize. The second is I want to give you some practical tips to do what you may not already be doing, but that can have a major impact on your online security. And third, I want you to feel empowered to be able to take control of your online security. So the analogy that I like to use is that when we're little, all we had to do we all had to learn to cross the street, right? And now it's a habit, right? Except when we go to a country, if we're in the US, we know that we have to look left and then right and then left. But if we go to the UK or Ireland or someplace where they're driving on the other side of the street, that habit will get us killed. And so now we need to learn how to look to the right, to the left, to the right, right? It's just a matter of learning this kind of stuff. Once you understand how to do it, you're going to be okay. So normally, this is where I talk about stats of an industry and why you should be worried. But as activists, you're dealing with an entirely different breed of hackers. Hackers who hack for their ideals are the most dangerous because they do it for their ideals, not for money, not for notoriety, but because they bought into a belief system so strongly that they are willing to scorch the earth to accomplish their goals. They don't care who they hurt. They don't care what happens, right? And there are hacktivists on both sides, right? They're on the right and on the left. There are whatever the situation is. Some of them may have more more ethics or morals that come in and doing it. Some of them are doing it for very particular reasons. I think of Anonymous when they hacked a few years ago, shortly after the Ukraine war started. They hacked the Russian government things, and they managed to break into like 92 of 100 different departments and things like that. So that is a type of hacktivism that happens. They're called hacktivists, right? It's a combination of activism and hacktivism. So the thing that we have to worry about as we participate in activists is people who are going to target us, right? They're not worried about just making money. They're worried about taking us down. And that brings you to a whole other level. And that doesn't mean that these aren't just people like you and me, or maybe with better computer skills. They still include large organizations and corporations and governments, right? So they may have the money and the resources behind it. If they really want to get to you, they will be able to get to you. I'm not going to I don't want to make it. And most of them aren't there, and most of us don't have to worry about that level. Instead, what we have to do is protect ourselves and just make it a little bit more complicated for them to track us down. Let's not make it obvious. Let's make it more difficult, right? For people to track us down, do the things that they're going to do, and things like that. All right. First, I want to just quickly start with a definition. We all think we know what cybersecurity is, but believe it or not, there are more definitions out there than I have pairs of socks. So it's comes down to protecting your digital assets and how you access them, right? I'm not going to go into, it includes your data that's stored on your computer, the devices you use, how you access the internet, where you access your physical environment, and the Internet of Things, right? I'm not going to go through all of that because we don't have time to go through all of that. I really want to focus on the stuff that you can do right now and that will automatically start making things a little bit better for you and to protect you online. Now, the level of, we'll talk about the level of security that you need. I'm going to preface this by saying that I think everyone should be doing everything. However, I do recognize that this is overwhelming and it's a lot of work. So I'm going to focus on quick wins. If you are a reporter or a group leader, right, somebody who is like very much in the public eye, you have a lot more to be worried about. And because you are going to be targeted simply because you are a much more visible, person, right? Versus somebody who might be a keyboard warrior or goes to street protests or, even I would say somebody who posts a lot about a particular topic with their real name. That's kind of a little bit in between, because if somebody's really mad about something, they're going to come after you. Okay, so a lot of the common cybersecurity advice, like I said, I'm not going to go over that kind of stuff. It's all really important, but these are the emails that you're getting all the time. Don't reuse your password, password management, use multi-factor authentication, don't share your credentials, and so on. Things that people miss that are surprising are things like software updates. We see things, don't update to the latest. The problem is that the latest software updates always contain security updates. So we don't want to not do that too, right? So this is just a different thing that goes with them. All right, so here's the page when you go to my website. I want you to just know this. The upper left-hand button, these are all buttons, I got a whole bunch of them there. You're welcome to check out all the different free tools and stuff to see the Have I Been Pawned link. The bottom middle one here that's on this list will tell you if your email address has been in any breaches. But I do have a section here specifically for activists. I want each of you to go to that link, right? And in there, you'll see a couple of different links. And one of them says activistchecklist.org. That is where you're going to get a whole lot of different things that you can do as an activist that you need to do. I think that a lot of it makes a lot of sense, but I also think it's missing some really important factors. So those are the things I'm going to be talking about because we have limited time. And like I said, you can access all of that there. And it's great. There's a lot of really good checklists. It tells you exactly what to do. But, don't feel overwhelmed. Just start making your way through this. Okay. The first thing I'm going to tell you that you need is that you need multiple email addresses. When we are setting up our activist life, we need to do one really important thing. We need to silo it separate from the rest of our life. That means you're using a different email address, you're using ideally a different browser, first of all, none of your passwords should be the same. If you are using the same password or a variation, that is a habit you absolutely have to break immediately, if not sooner. Use the maximum number of letters and numbers and combinations that you can use. Unfortunately, there are still websites that are like, you can only max out at 8, which is crazy because in 2025, AI can figure out your password. What we were told was going to be centuries is now like 12 seconds. So that's a different issue. But the email addresses that you need is you need a personal email address that has never been used to log in for anything. You need a separate email address for your socials. And it wouldn't be Natalie Berthe 1, Natalie Berthe 2, Natalie Berthe 3. It would be, I don't know, my personal, maybe my name or something like that without your birthday. Please don't add to your birthday, but your socials might be something weird like 57 purple penguins at gmail.com or, 23 green leaves at, whatever email address you want, right? Those could be your socials. They're unusual. Their name is not directly obvious to you, right? The next one is that you need to have a separate work for all your advocacy work. Anything that you're doing, if you're logging into groups, if you are emailing or networking with people, do a separate email address that's not associated with anything else. It's really, really important to do that, because if someone is able to access a group or access information, you want an email address that doesn't come back directly to you, so it doesn't destroy the rest of your personal life or business life if you own a business. If you have a public facing, if you are in a business or there's something that you're doing, maybe you're an influencer or something like that, and you want to post an email address, you should have a public facing email address that, again, is not connected to anything you've ever logged in with before. Okay, so you'll see on the last slide here and on the link tree, I have a couple of public facing email addresses, right? Hello at, or Cybersec for Humans, and speaker at Cybersec for Humans. I have never used either one of those to log into anything ever. So if somebody decides that they're going to run it through a system somewhere to figure out where, how they can hack into my stuff, they can go right ahead, because I've literally never used either one of those to log into anything. So it's not going to go anywhere. And then, of course, the last one I said is everything else, like your newsletters that you belong to, your mail, your shopping, and things like that. Okay. This is what I was just explaining with the email address everywhere. Public-facing email addresses, never to be used for anything else ever. And then the second thing is that, and this is actually how I got roped into doing this, was when I met Salman and I saw his LinkedIn profile. I said to him, as I always do anytime I meet them, hey, you need to remove your public-facing email address on LinkedIn. And because LinkedIn does not allow you a different email address for public-facing versus your login information. So anytime I see someone's email address on LinkedIn, right, in their contact information, I said, oh, that's their login information. Congratulations, you've just given anybody who wants to hack your ID, whether or not it's because you're an activist, you've now given them half the equation. Now all they need is your password. And if you are, using the same password as 70-something% of Americans do on everything or some very close variation of it, then all they have to do is run it through a system. And there you go. They can figure out what your password is. So just make sure you're actually going to go, if you want to do your LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, you'll go into settings and privacy, visibility, and I'll ask who can see my email address, just put only me. So it's simple to do, but it's absolutely necessary. Okay, so one of the things, does anybody have any questions? I know I'm going through this fast because I want to give you guys time to answer questions, ask questions if you have any. Okay, so one of the things that we are told often as activists is to use Signal. Some people use WhatsApp, but mostly Signal. But the problem is the same. These programs are end-to-end encryption, as are, I think, Apple, right? The problem is that people set it up so that it shows up as a notification banner. Do you know what those are? So the banner, right, is the little square that pops up. It's kind of like the little preview that says, hey, Gardy sent you a text message, and it says, maybe the first line or something like that. The problem is that as soon end-to-end encryption is within the app, and as soon as it gets out of the app and pops up as your notification, you have now broken encryption. So you want to make sure that any of your end-to-end apps, right, end-to-end encryption apps, which are Telegram, Signal, and WhatsApp, do not send a notification to your phone that it is there. Now, a banner, the badges, right, where it says, oh, you have 37 messages, or in the case of my WhatsApp, 4,876, whatever. those are fine. It can pop up as those numbers are fine. The problem is really when it pops up as a banner. And yeah, it's a pain in the ass, but you don't want to break that. Even Apple, which is known for having great privacy and security, got in trouble a couple of years ago because there was some study, I think it was Reuters, that figured out that Apple was taking the information that they were learning from the notifications and using that information, right? So Apple was just doing what any big tech company was doing, was skimming the information. But when you're using end-to-end encryption, that kind of sucks because now your stuff isn't protected. Okay. The next thing to do, this is tedious but super important, is to go onto every app you have and shut down the AI training, right? I just heard a really scary statistic the other day that said that they can figure out, because they've been watching and collecting data on us, for well over a decade. Y'all remember Edward Snowden, if you're old enough, when he was warning us about how they were collecting information. And, but that they can figure anything out. And even if you delete it. But the thing is that maybe they can, but why are we giving it to them so easily, right? So what you want to do, and AI is only going to do this, especially as activists work, especially with this administration, especially with Palantir that is making moves, not just in the US, but around the world. We need to make it just a little like that much less enticing. And that's what you have to do. But here's the thing. If you have multiple, for example, Instagram accounts, like I have several business accounts as well as my personal account on Instagram, each of those accounts may require me to individually go in and shut down that AI training. I have to go in and say, don't follow me off the computer, don't follow me. I don't want you to take my offline browsing and whatever you're doing. You've got to shut all of that down. Every single app that you're working on. While you're at it, your cookies and, they're talking about stuff, you can clear out every cookie and then either only accept the necessary cookies or reject all cookies, right? There's some websites don't let you do that, in which case you just do the necessary one and from time to time clear it out. Okay. This includes, I'm sure you've heard Windows is now doing this. Copilot is trying to do this on Windows. They're all doing it. Like they're all trying to train their AI tools. So, okay, this is a really big one. And this is just general privacy, but also really important, especially when you're doing different kinds of work. So before we had all the data in the 70s and 80s, which seems like a long time for some of you, but that was, I was just a girl. Companies like American Express and Visa and what have you would literally hire people to go through all of your statements and figure out the patterns in your data so they knew what to target, right? So are you somebody who seems to buy a lot of diapers? You must have young kids, right? So now they've got you on a kid track. Are you somebody who goes out to eat a lot? That puts you in a different kind of track, right? So they would do all of that. They don't have to do that anymore. Now they just collect all the information online. So what you want to do is you just, shut it all down. Now in Europe, you have the option of just requesting to have your data deleted. California has now put in, there's actually several states that have it. Maryland just passed it. New York is about to pass it. I think there's like 6 or 7 states, but California has the most strict one where upon request, they have to delete all of your data. And by the way, it does not have to be the company. I actually just went through this for something that I had when my kids were playing sports. The company that owns the platform is like, we're not responsible for your data. And I was like, actually, you legally are. And come to think of it, I haven't heard from them again, so I have to reach back out to them. If you can't find the information on how to delete your data, not just shut off your account or delete your account, you want to delete your data from their tools, then the way to go about doing this is oftentimes a lot of places, especially if they have an international presence or they're based out of Europe, you literally just press a button or you fill out a quick little form that's quick to do. Sometimes you have to send them an email and just keep bugging them until they do. They usually have 30 or 45 days to do it. Delete every account you don't use anymore. Delete all of them, right? Because everything that gives you more of a digital footprint. Your goal as an activist, and frankly, as a human being in 2025, 26, is to limit your digital footprint as much as possible. Okay, that's why I said on this list, if you can't delete it, track it. Track which ones that are doing this stuff. Okay, now if you are doing something that requires a level of security or networking, that might be something that is could put you in a more difficult position, or is it a little bit more sensitive? I'm trying to figure out the most elegant way of saying this without implying anything. Then use safe words. Use a safe word. We tell people that even in basic training, right, when we're talking to our kids or our parents, like, hey, if somebody calls and demands money from you, ask them for the family safe word. What is the family safe word? Or when a lot of, for example, real estate brokers, specifically title companies, will come in and say, I need a safe word, right? Like when you call and you say, I want to make these changes, I'm going to call you and I'm going to ask you for the safe word. Or, I mean, they now even do this like with brides and, weddings and stuff like that, because the person who should be making the changes need to be doing that. But in this case, if you are like, it sounds sort of, when we were little and we were playing, I don't know, whatever games we're playing, Spy and something like that, like there's some some validity on that. Like, what's your safe word? What is it? Am I really talking to the person I think I'm talking to? Are you really supposed to be here? And and don't make it obvious. I know it's something dumb, but don't make it obvious and things like that. Okay. Okay, and so again, here are the resources, my email address that is public facing and thus never been used on anything like that. And again, all my link trees. So I can stop sharing and then we can start talking about, ta-da, stop sharing. Voila.
I have a question.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so I think all of this makes sense to have different accounts, public facing versus personal versus business versus, advocacy. Now, that can be a little bit difficult to track. And for each one of these accounts, you need a separate password.
Yeah.
Do you trust the Google password manager?
Absolutely not. I'm going to tell you, and I know people are going to be, people are going to disagree with me. I've been using LastPass for 15 years, like a really long time. And even after there's a whole bunch of other stuff, and you don't have to use LastPass. I've got on my resources page, and I pay for it because I have a family plan because I taught my kids how to use it. And the thought of trying to teach them a new password manager was more overwhelming than anything else. Everything goes into my password manager. And my login for my password manager is weird and long, but it is something that I can read or, it's not the random letters and numbers. Every single one of my passwords is I don't generate any of my own passwords. I might do it temporarily, but then I go in and I switch it later, like if I have to sign up for something that I had anticipated. And I try to get it as long as possible. My preference right now are passwords in the high 20s and low 30s, like characters long. But like I said, there are some tools that, some websites or whatever apps that will only let you do 12 or 15 or 20 or something. And so I'll do that. No, absolutely not. I would never use Google or anybody else to log in to any other tool ever, because that's a social login, because once they're in one, they're in everything. And I don't use them as well, right? This is part of our effort to silo. Just for example, I don't use for my two-factor authentication, which everything I can two-factor, I have multi-factor authentication. I also don't use LastPass for that, right? Because I don't want all my eggs in a single basket. If that makes sense.
Okay, all right. Katrina has a question.
Karina, actually.
Karina, sorry.
Thanks. I think I have a world of questions, but
go for it.
This thing of like saving your login, password, and username when you're going to the various sites that you frequent, I'm gonna guess that you shouldn't save your password on there.
So there's two things you could be talking about. One of them will say save login, and basically what it does is it puts a cookie. It keeps you logged in all the time, right? It doesn't actually log you back in later. It keeps you logged in indefinitely. I always check that off. Absolutely. The second place is, Google will pop up and say, hey, do you want us to save your username and password? And the answer to that is no, because I use Bitwarden or LastPass or 1Password or any of the other options that are out there, including that are free. Like, you don't have to pay for it. And I just went into Google and I shut that off so I don't get that message anymore. But yeah, we don't save anything ever. I don't even save it at home. And I've split up. Like, there's my extended presentation talks about how when we're working from home, most routers, especially in the US, most companies are now offering 3 levels within a single router. You have your primary, then you have your secondary, which is they call guest, but it's just as encrypted as the primary. And then the third level is your IoT or Internet of Things, because Internet of Things are just notoriously terrible. And so everything in my house that has Internet of Things, like the cameras or the washing machine and dryer, which I didn't want to do, but my kid was like, we got to use this. And now I'm happy we do. And so those are on IoT, that level. It's the lowest level encryption. But nobody gets access to the top level, to the level that I use for my work. Not even my kids, right? They get, especially for their computers and stuff, they're using what, we call the guest password, which really isn't guest.
So maybe I missed something, but it sounded like you were presenting this in this case of being hacked, but is this also applying to the mass surveillance that's about to be implemented on us?
Yeah, it is, because that's one of the reasons that we need to silo. And that's what I'm saying is the mass surveillance has been going on for 15 plus years. Like, this is not new. The question is what they're doing with the information. The mass surveillance that happened before, and I there's a whole debate as to whether or not this was real, but I do think that there was an intent to protect the United States, right? Protect Americans, protect the government, protect things. That is no longer the case, right? They don't care about that, because if they did, they wouldn't have allowed Doge to, come in and do some sketchy stuff. And then, we've got proof that the Russians immediately were logging into the back end of websites, right? The mass surveillance, I think you're talking about things are like Palantir. And how that's going to affect you as you travel, if that's going to affect you where you work, and everything else that's going on with that. That is a much bigger problem, but a legitimate problem. It still continues to be a problem. So then what our job is, in order to do what we're doing, is to limit the impact it's going to have on our personal lives and especially our loved ones, right? I've disconnected from my kids on a lot of my social media because I don't want them necessarily associated with me. And I also changed my name when I got divorced, right? Because I don't want them to be affected by what I do. Meanwhile, my one of my sons is just as much of an activist as me, and he's like, "Mom, I don't even know if I'll be allowed to come back into the U.S. Like, are they going to give me a hard time?" And I said, "Possibly, if you leave, right? Because of the work that he's done." So, so there's an argument to be made that whatever it is that we are doing now is kind of like closing the barn after the what's the expression? The horses have left. But there's still real value in shutting down as much as you can. That's why you shut accounts you're not using anymore. That's why, if you are using your login information to all the stuff that you're doing for your activist work or something like that, get a new email address. Don't use your phone number or use a second phone or, I would say a burner phone, right, that you can send accounts to that is not associated with your day-to-day life in what you're doing. Use a password manager, because despite what you can say about LastPass, and that's a whole other discussion, right? It is a grade of encryption that is not breakable. Like if you don't have your password on LastPass, they can't help you, right? So I have an emergency. If I ever forget my password, I have two of my kids they can access it if I don't log in within 2 days or something like that, right? So I can get around that if that's what I need to do. So I still think that there's real value in limiting, there's different things, right? So what we can control is how much information we put out there and who can easily access what we do. Then we can control the next level that we can also control is if it's making it more complicated for people to make the connection that Natalie, who owns all these businesses, is the same person who's out there doing all this advocacy work, right? Or activist work. The really, really big picture is going to be almost impossible to control. But then, they still need to put the things together. If you have never had a digital footprint, you're going to be fine. Right? That's the best way to go about doing it. Or you have always been super clean. But most of us have not. I mean, I have been neurotic about privacy since I did my research paper in 2000. I have been absolutely neurotic. And I know that I have not been pristine.
I don't want to command the floor here, but I don't see any other hands right now. But so can I ask another question?
You can ask as many questions as you want.
So to the thing about deleting online accounts. So I started an online account for banking, but I don't use it, and I really don't want to use it. I'm trying to reject anybody that's forcing me to log into some new site. Like my doctors use portals now too, and I hate that. But I haven't deleted, like, should I call my bank and say I want to delete my login information because I created, I don't use it though.
So we're kind of in a weird place, right? Because everything is online. Everything. Now, I will tell you, one of the things I didn't go into detail, just because it kind of overwhelms, is that the email addresses I have, one is for personal email. I haven't signed anything up for except for my medical stuff. I have what I call a high trust email address. Doesn't have my name, has a fake name on it, has a weird email address that half the time I have to spell, I thought I was being clever. That was not a good idea. But those are my high trust. Those banks, those are my monthly bills. Those tend to be really tight. So I'm less worried about that. And then I have another email address, which is all the shopping, the login for whatever streaming services the kids are watching at the time and things like that. Their Chipotle, numbers and things like that. So that's all associated with a different email address. And then I have a whole bunch of different email addresses for, my work stuff. I'm less worried about your bank information unless you're storing a lot of money in your bank than I am, because even if you were storing a lot of money in your bank, it would still be all electronic, right? You maybe have to go in, like if you had accounts in the Caymans or in the Swiss and, in Switzerland or something like that, you would still, it's all done electronically, right? So there's no way to completely get away with it. What I'm talking about, if you're not using it, delete the account. You don't need to do it. I am more concerned about things like, so I just cleaned out, I spent the month of October cleaning out my LastPass account. I have 3 kids, and between school and sports and whatever else that they did, I had well over 600 accounts on my things, right? And I keep bumping into stuff going, God, I didn't even realize I still had this account. And I'm just talking is because now I'm cleaning out the email addresses and I'm finding more accounts. Those are the accounts. That's like, oh, well, you know what? The kids aren't playing lacrosse anymore. So I'm going in and I'm saying, hey, I need all these accounts deleted, right? That is, I want all of that account, or my travel accounts, or somehow one of my youngest ended up with multiple United Airlines accounts, right? So like we're deleting all of those accounts, things that we aren't using, things we don't use very often. Oh, I haven't done this, my change.org account. I stopped using that. I don't even know how long ago. And I've had that account for right after change.org existed, right? Because I've been doing this stuff for so long. So those are the kinds of accounts that tell a better story about you. And those are the ones that are building up who you are and what you're interested in, rather than just, I have an account with my phone and my, gas and my electric and my water and my bank and my car payment and my mortgage, right? Like they don't care about, like that's pretty standard, and they're going to find that all out is when somebody has my social security number. It's all the other stuff that I'm more concerned about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
But if you're not using it, definitely delete it.
Okay.
Because it's always easy to set it back up if you need it. But I said, and I have a separate email address. That email address gets used for absolutely nothing except my high trust, my life insurance, right? Except for the high trust things.
Okay.
Okay, so if I may ask a quick question.
Of course.
So on my to-do list, I'll be adding, a bunch of emails account to create, because obviously using that one mail account with my name in it is not a good idea. Some people go even further, where they have their name and their birth year in the email, which is even worse. But anyways, so this also
I always like, can
entails
we please just like drop the birthdays? I look on LinkedIn, it was like, nobody cares about what your birthday is. Please remove this. Like your phone number, like it's an email. Yeah.
So this also entails that when you want to sign up to a new service, or you've never been there before, they say, do you want to log in with Google?
No, you don't want to log in with Google.
Okay.
You want to log in with an email. And I will tell you this, sometimes it's hard to find. There's been a couple places where I went to go log into, and I realized they didn't give me a choice. I had to use LinkedIn or Google to log in. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to set up an account with them. Correct. Right? A legitimate company is always going to give you the option of signing up with an email address. So you sign up with an email address.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be Gmail, right? Because Google implemented this rule a couple years ago where you can have more than 4 email addresses associated with your phone number. I now know to not be true, but initially they were really strict about it. But of course, I have all these email addresses over 20 plus years. Like when my first email address that I got with Google, I'm going to age myself here as if I haven't already. I had to get invited to sign up with an email address, right? For the first few years, you had to get an invite to be able to set up an email account. So, I have a whole bunch of email addresses that are associated with my phone number. And I was able to recently set up a new email address with my phone number without a problem. So I think they don't want you to set up a whole bunch of email addresses like all at once. And you should be fine with that.
I have a follow-up. So basically,
Yeah, go ahead.
Obviously, with all these email addresses, you need a account/password management system. Otherwise, or you use the same password, which is a dumb idea.
Yeah.
So you use LastPass.
I do.
Why do you trust that more than Google Password Manager?
There are there are multiple reasons. One, it's that whole, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. And I say this knowing that I use Google Workspace for my work, and I have my professional email addresses through that, and I use Google Meet. But I actually don't pay any of my bills or have any of my important login information in Google. So if that all disappeared tomorrow, it would suck, but I would live, right? Like my entire world wouldn't shut down. Second, despite the fact that Google, of all of big tech, has had some of the best security. They have the 0-day team that literally goes and is tracking everything that's happening and finding problems that no one else has found. Like they do a lot of really good stuff. There still have been problems with the email. And I mean, this kind of starts getting technical, but when you start trying, especially if you're not using a VPN or you're not using incognito, the problem with that is that there's just too many fingers can get caught in that pie, if you will. I don't know if that's a good analogy there, but it's easier for it to get hacked because of all the other stuff that's happening. It does not have the level of encryption as LastPass or Bitwarden or 1Password or any of these other companies, right? Like I was saying earlier, that like all the eggs in one basket thing, I don't want it all there. I want something that's going to be separate. I actually started using LastPass because, one, it was free when I started doing it. They still have a free one, but it's not as generous as when I was doing it. And then for a while there, it like LinkedIn. I'm sorry, the LastPass was I could have as an app on my phone, so I could log into my apps using the LastPass as well as on my computer. And when I initially started, Google didn't give you that as an option, but even Apple Keys or whatever it's called is now allowing you to use multiple things. I still wouldn't trust it. I don't want my operating system to be the same as my security system.
Okay, there's a question here. So do you see corporations eliminating the options for using logins and just go to biometrics?
That's a really good question and something I've struggled with quite a bit, because I think biometrics are, especially facial recognition, are really dangerous. I think that when you had your thumbprint, like when you could do your fingerprint on the phones, it wasn't so obvious, right? Like all of our fingerprints are fairly unique, whereas doppelgangers exist, right? You've got siblings who are not twins who are like physically identical or almost identical. And so I think it's more dangerous. I think corporations are pushing right now biometrics and passkeys, and they're claiming it's more secure. I don't yet believe that. They're also trying to do single sign-in password. It's called one. Essentially, they have to send you, like, you no longer have a password. It forces you to use an email address or a phone number. And I think that is to kind of counter the fact that people have really shitty passwords. And so they're like, well, we're going to force the thing. But I find that a lot. I don't find that as secure as my LastPass, which is long and super complicated as opposed to a 7-digit code. So, you're not seeing, here's what I will say. You're not seeing the big banks moving to that. Not yet. Not yet. They're not even trying to move to that yet. And if there's someone who's going to stay on top of their security, it's the big banks, because they don't want it. They don't want to have their money stolen.
Okay, question from Adam.
Yeah.
What can you share about the most secure laptops to use? I heard that tech-savvy people use older laptops without backdoors.
I don't know. You're okay. So this goes back to, I briefly touched upon it in the presentation. That the problem with, first of all, there's no such thing as nothing with a back door, right? The only way there's no back door is if you're never connected online. That's just the way it is, right? There's always been a back door in everything that they do. Like, now there are certain operating systems that are more secure than others, but I think it's a bit of a fallacy to say there is no back door. I don't know. I'm not a tech person, so I can't tell you the best computer to use. But what I can say is this. Unless you're building your own computer and maybe using an older computer, the problem is if, when Windows upgraded from Windows Vista, which was terrible, which was essentially Windows 7, right? And then we went to Windows 8 and then Windows 10 and then Windows 11. But I'm using them as an example. I don't know if you all remember that in May 2021, the WannaCry Trojan absolutely swept the world. Do you remember that? Right? It was like, so WannaCry was a Trojan, was a virus. It was ransomware that literally shut down a crazy number of Windows computers, including, by the way, the UK's National Health Service. Nobody could get into any of their computers. Those take advantage of, but if you had been updating your profile, it was fine. If you've been updating your operating system, you didn't have this problem because it took advantage of an existing known vulnerability. Microsoft said, hey, in February, we have this vulnerability. This is urgent. Update your computers. And the people who did not do that could no longer access their computer in May because somebody came along and did that. My concern about using an old system, unless you're using DOS, right, which is old, unless you're using DOS and certain scripts, you've got to be careful about which system you're using, because if the vulnerabilities exist, somebody knows how to take advantage of them. Unless you're dealing with really old C++, DOS, and other programs. That's why those are secure. That's why the Social Security Administration is still so secure, because nobody except for a handful of people know how to use the database language that was used in, I don't know, Cobalt. It might have been Cobalt that they're using. Like, I'm again aging myself here, but Cobalt, and nobody knows how to code in DOS and Cobalt. So it's secure because there's just a lack of knowledge, not because it's actually secure. And there's value in that. I'm not going to disagree with that, but so I'm not entirely the right person to ask about that, but also I do know that there's no such thing as nothing with a backdoor.
Correct. And if I may add, you probably have limited functionality, limited products available. and you'd have to be like a guru to even use that environment. But that's
COBOL, sorry.
right?
Sorry,
Use that
Catherine.
environment.
That's exactly right.
We're probably at the end. Maybe if somebody has a final question. Otherwise, Natalie, I don't know if you have some closing remarks, and then otherwise we'll wrap it up.
I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to do stuff. If you have any questions that come up, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email. You know, I hope this was helpful. It's you know, it's not as much time. I created a course called Secure Your Shit specifically to start off, because I would be sitting in meetings and people like, but how do I was like, just secure your shit. I was like, just call your course then. I went, okay, so that's what I did. I started a course specifically to walk you through the process of doing all of this, because it is important for all of us to do. But you know, if I say nothing else, if you take away nothing else, just remember that you need to silo your work, your activist work, from the rest of your stuff. Yes, you can get a copy of the slides. I have no problem with that. I can PDF them and send them to Salman, and he can send them to you guys. Does that work?
Excellent. Great. Good idea. So thank you very much, Natalie. I think we're out of time. So this was, even for me, just very, 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 very helpful. I've got a lot of homework to do. I need to protect myself, protect my family. So I'll definitely get a copy of the slides, and I'll be reaching out to you if required. So everybody, thank you very much for your time. And we'll see you guys online next week.
All right.
Create your diverse emails and protect yourself out there.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.